Next Curve.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to Next Curve's Rethink podcast, where we break down the latest tech and industry events and happenings into the insights that matter. I'm Leonard Lee, Executive Analyst at Next Curve, and today I have a very special guest, Hyoun Park of Amalgam Insights. Hey, man. How's it going?
Going good.
Yeah.
Been a busy week.
Welcome.
Right?
Yeah. It's always a busy week, especially this year. It's been really crazy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's good to have you on. We've been following each other on LinkedIn for ages now, right?
Oh, yeah, years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Always going back and forth on the latest thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so for all of you out there in Next Curve audience land, if you don't know Hyoun, he's brilliant. And he shares some great insights on what's happening in AI, all the data analytics stuff. And I've always appreciated the work that you do, as well as the insights that you share to pretty much everyone, right? You know,
I try to keep it social. I try to talk to everyone.
Yeah. And you are everywhere. It's pretty amazing. You almost keep up with me.
Oh, no, not quite. I didn't make it out to Barcelona this year or anything. So
yeah, you did you miss out on anything? Yeah, you missed out.
the architecture, if nothing else, the food, the company.
Yes, there you go. Yeah. So before we get started, please remember to like, share, and react and comment on this episode, and also subscribe here on YouTube and Buzzsprout. Listen to us on your favorite podcast platform. Opinions and statement by my guests are their own and don't reflect mine or those of Next Curve. And we're doing this to provide an open forum for discussion and debate on all things tech. And with that, Hyoun, why don't you introduce yourself to the Next Curve audience?
Yeah. So I'm Hyoun Park. I'm the founder and chief analyst here at Amalgam Insights. It's a firm I've run for 8 years. I've been an industry analyst for 17 years total, and I tend to have two major practice areas. One is around IT management, where I look a lot at the costs of IT, as well as some of the downstream observability and inventory management challenges. And then on the data side, I look a lot at data, analytics, AI, whatever we're calling this now. But the interesting thing to me has always been that the AI side, right now, what we're doing is actually a very small subset of the full world of AI. We just found one really great use case for this generative AI thing, and it's just exploded and taken off.
Yeah. And so what we wanted to talk about, and by the way, thanks for that introduction. And again, later on in this episode, what we'll do is give Hyoun a chance to provide his contact information, as well as provide you with some links to where you can find his research. So there's two things that we wanted to talk about. FinOps and you're at the FinOps. Help me again with the name of the event.
Oh, it was just FinOpsX.
Yeah, FinOpsX, as well as the Databricks conference, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so I just want to tell you, I have a huge interest in FinOps. Early on, when I'm back in my Gartner days, actually, I was working on some early work around FinOps. At that time, people weren't really conscious of cloud costs, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't really have a way of benchmarking the different types of services and, be able to determine region by region or even locality by locality what the cost was, right? And so there was some early work that was being done back then. And so I when you told me that you were at FinOpsX, I was thinking, man, I got to have him on because he probably has some great insights. And I know you've been tracking that area pretty persistently. I haven't, to be honest, but I'd love for you to share with the audience what some of your key takes are and were from that conference. But then also, the Databricks. You started rattling off some really interesting stuff, and I cut you off because I want to make sure that we get that organic presentation of your insights. So I'm really interested to hear what you learned at Databricks. But let's start off with FinOpsX. And what's the state of FinOps, my friend?
So for those of you who don't know, FinOps is short for financial operations. It gets used to talk about the financial operations of cloud cost and cloud computing pretty specifically.
Yeah.
And, 5 or 6 years ago, I've been covering this for a decade, but honestly, until about 4 or 5 years ago, it didn't really take off. Like 5 or 6 years ago, the logic around cloud computing was just commit to one cloud, get really good at it, and build fast because zero interest, just go fast, get more funding, and and just rocket ship your cloud computing at all costs.
Ride that hockey stick, right?
Yeah. And now people are realizing both you need to control cloud costs, which makes a whole lot of sense when these get to $50 or $100 million in costs. I guess it finally starts meaning something. And people are thinking about multi-cloud and hybrid cloud use cases to a greater extent as well. So you'll use Amazon as your main cloud, but you might use Google for a little bit of AI or Oracle because their connectivity is really good. So that has become a much bigger play. And pretty much the biggest theme this year is that FinOps professionals have been successful in cutting costs. So they found, call it 20 to 30% in wasted cost out of this $50 million bucket. And they've done such a good job that they're starting to be asked to manage other areas as well. So they're being asked to look at the data center. They're being asked to look at SaaS portfolios, which can often be 1,000 apps within an or more.
Right.
And now, honestly, I think they are struggling to figure out how do we take our successes in cloud computing and start expanding it to the rest of the IT ecosystem.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, and that makes sense because a growing portion of the IT ecosystem or portfolio is quote unquote cloud based and outsourced, and SaaS is a huge component of that, or at least an increasing component of that, right? Actually, platform services all the way down. Yeah. So yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And then and one of the things that we used to look at very early on, this is before, so it looks like we started looking at this stuff around the same time. Maybe you were looking at it a bit earlier than me, but one of the challenges that a lot of organizations or IT organizations had was benchmarking cost versus their traditional cost of operating certain workloads and applications, right? And that was like fundamentally one of the big, let's call it, breakthroughs when FinOps, basic FinOps capabilities started to come into play and data sets started coming into play, is that IT organizations could benchmark at least cloud versus our IT service operations, right? And cost to deliver. And so, is that like also part of the thinking? Looking at the entire portfolio and also still making that decision between should we continue to host these applications or workloads and data in our let's say call it quote unquote traditional operations and infrastructure versus cloud, because there was a lot of talk about repatriation, right, the last couple of years, right, and a lot of that entailed, hey, let's bring some of these workloads and applications back, and that may or may not entail bringing things back on-prem or within a colo data centers that are cloud, quote unquote, cloud native, right? So what are some of the trends around that type of thinking or application of FinOps capabilities and practices?
Yeah, so I feel like with FinOps, there's had to be a lot more focus on the subscription costs as well as usage specific costs, where you have massive transactional volumes that you have to track at
Yeah.
0.00001 cent per thing per log,
Yeah. Okay.
whatever it is, and it ends up growing to millions of dollars.
Mhm.
So I feel like that granular control has led companies to be able to think about their IT more strategically, but at the same time, they are realizing at the same time that there's some opportunity for repatriation. I think that it is a little overrated in that I don't think anybody that is cloud native is suddenly going to throw 90% of their stuff back into on-prem. That's just not going to happen. It's too
Yeah.
common.
Yeah.
You can definitely find steady workflows, stable workflows that do not change much month to month. And when that's the case, you are definitely better off moving that back to a dedicated server.
Sure. Right.
That cost structure is pretty straightforward, which is why there's been use cases like Basecamp recently talking about how they've been able to push millions of dollars of savings by going back to an on-prem pure storage implementation instead of AWS, for instance. But for every story like that, there's also a story like Zynga that figured out we're a gaming company. We're so dynamic that it does not make sense for us to repatriate, even though we thought we could do it. We tried because our cloud costs were through the roof. But we just don't have the right business model to be able to actually repatriate all that much. It really depends on how dynamic business is.
Yeah, and so what's your sense of like the decision criteria, or like the high level decision criteria, or organizations are making in terms of whether or not they keep things with their cloud service providers or SaaS providers versus bringing things back? And I'm just curious because the repatriation topic was such a big deal last year. And quite honestly, I don't know whether or not that's bleeding into this year. It seems to have kind of tapered off a bit, but, do you see a shift in how decision makers are thinking about that migration line, if you will, or that transition line?
Yeah. So the most honest truth is I feel like a lot of the talk about repatriation started going away, as well as cost, simply because of AI. Everybody is so overwhelmed with these new AI budgets and projects that it sucked all the air out of the room out of being rational about anything.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I feel like that actually took up some of the talk around rationalization and repatriation that would normally be happening right now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So is there an emerging topic around FinOps related to like these Neoclouds? Some people call them Cloud 2.0, but I think they're entirely different animals. Actually, they're more like it's like supercomputing as a service, right?
Oh, yeah, like the CoreWeaves of the world, the GPUs and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, was that a topic this year? Are they looking at those costs can be extremely high.
Yes.
And they can really get out of control, right?
Yeah.
And cost significant dollars, right? So any talks or
there's definitely a lot of talk around FinOps for AI, which it sounds extremely vague, but I would say the fundamental challenge around generative AI is that the token cost itself is fairly straightforward. Everybody knows how much an API calls costs, but once you start typing in that prompt into a window, there's no way to really predict how long is that prompt going to be. Is it a 2-sentence prompt, or is it going to be 3,000 words? And then what level of information are you asking back? Are you asking for something that can be answered in a couple kilobytes, or are you going to ask for something that gives you a 3-minute movie and 12 million pictures and a novel of information back? And because of that, you can't really predict whether a prompt is going to be a kilobyte or a megabyte or a gigabyte a response.
Right.
It provides a whole lot of complication on just understanding what is the unit economics of one prompt call or one AI call when so much could happen. And That is another thing that people are struggling with, because we don't have great governance to support managing limiting the compute and storage associated with a basic AI call right now. And I think part of that is just fundamental tech that needs to be put into place, those guardrails associated with our AI use.
Well, was there any talk about the dynamics of pricing as well as model efficiency? Because, that really, those two things really shape the top line economics for any end user, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, because, the pricing is very dynamic. Mostly it's going down, it's plummeting, right? But then, like you were saying, the token, although a lot of folks talk about, cost per token, it's the compute required to generate that token can be very different based on the model as well as the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Right. So how baked would you say the thinking is around this Neocloud type of FinOps, FinOps topic? Is it doughy, or is it like pretty well baked and ready to pull out of the oven?
I would say it's pretty doughy. I think we're trying to figure out how much yeast to put in. Like, if we're going to get really
the ingredients yet.
Yeah, we don't even know what all the ingredients are. There was an interesting startup I saw there called Payi, that was looking at that full value chain and being able to calculate, okay, here's the token, here's the compute, here's the storage, here's everything that went into your unit use of AI. And they look like they have an interesting tool there. But honestly, when I was talking to the IBMs and Broadcoms and kind of the market leaders in the FinOps space about this, they were still talking about the cost of AI in a conceptual fashion, much as we are doing for the past few minutes, understanding that there are multiple units involved in the unit of an AI, but not really being able to calculate it yet. This is actually a great time to get into the game from that regard, talking about the cost of AI.
And it's interesting because this feels a lot like the early days of FinOps with the cloud. Because that's exactly what people were trying to do. It's how do we get the market intelligence, but also get insight into performance, cost performance.
Yeah,
it's exactly the same stuff, right? Except I think with the cloud FinOps early days, it was just a matter of being able to source the information, right? And then set up telemetry to help you get that marketplace dashboard going, right? So that you can do comparisons, but then also, there's always this question of, do we actually move things to the cloud, or do we keep things within our traditional data centers and operations and hosting? I think the let's call it Neocloud FinOps will probably have to go through the same process, but the velocity is going to be a hell of a lot faster, just because you hear Jensen and Lisa Su talk about like 1 year cadence on the back end of all this stuff. So it's going to be really tricky.
But
I agree with you. Doughy. It's doughy.
Another weird problem is that in, say, the network world, we have network performance, and we can talk about storage and compute, MIPS, database, and data warehousing benchmarks. In AI, we don't have quite the same benchmarks. We have a few benchmarks that talk about how well AI can do college level math or something, but that's not really what most of us use AI first. We're trying to solve specific business problems that don't necessarily have well-documented benchmarks yet. So performance, when we're trying to talk about cost and performance trade-offs, we don't even know how to measure performance in a lot of cases, because we haven't done the custom benchmarking needed that aligns to our own business processes.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's great. So, hey, why don't we move on to Databricks? So You made some interesting comments before we hit the record button. So, what were some of the highlights for you at that conference? What are some of the dominating themes?
Yeah, so Databricks has been talking AI forever.
Everybody's
Yes, but this time around, they actually are spending a lot of more time talking about business intelligence, data integration, and pulling back and taking on, say, the Tableaus of the world, the Power BIs of the world, companies that have been doing straightforward analytics. And Databricks is very straightforward about it. They're saying we want to own everything around data, and we realize that we can't get there unless we also have this analytics piece of the puzzle to go along with our data catalogs and our data lakes and rivers.
Right. Yeah. That's interesting. And so, one of the things that I'm noticing, and it's interesting that you're observing this, and that Databricks is maybe pivoting slightly away from the AI, like the AI only conversation, is that there's more, especially with this agentic stuff, and even previously with RAG, there's I wouldn't say that it's a broad recognition, but a growing one. And it is a reality that many of the AI applications that we're looking at, whether it's agentic or it's a single shot generative AI, chatbot type stuff or anything in between, there's going to be a heavy dependence on conventional, what they call tools now, right? Especially with the agentic stuff. And a lot of those tools, whether it's interfaced through proprietary interfaces or all this like talk about MCP, the MCP is not the big deal, right? The fact is MCP is going to be tapping into traditional analytics capabilities that are deterministic. They're the old school stuff that are not going to go away, And so this is something that I'm seeing just in my own research, right? And largely yet to be recognized amongst the vendors that I talk to. But it's interesting to see that you're seeing that shift at Databricks in terms of this recognition that, hey, we just can't talk about AI all the time. If we want to, quote unquote, own the enterprise data, or at least help our customers with AI, we need to focus on the foundational stuff underneath it, right? Because this stuff is not going to, the AI stuff is not going to operate with any value in isolation. Is that kind of the way that you saw it, or is that the way that they were representing it, or is it something different?
Yeah, I would say that.
By the way, you can say you're full of it.
No, I actually felt it was a lot of the conversations were about being common sense. Even when Databricks talked about things like AgentBricks, their new agent platform to be able to create new agents. The value proposition came down to being able to work with data lineage and being able to create testing environments for your agent, going back to the standard software development lifecycle. Like pushing that to agents. And that's really where everything was shining. Databricks was talking about its data warehousing capabilities, its analytics capabilities, data pipelines, all the stuff that is honestly not new, but it's stuff that Databricks has to really emphasize to go along with the data lake and Delta Lake discussions that they are much better known for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it seems like it makes sense that they would try to create those bridges, right? Going back to what I was saying before, it's like you have data, you have enterprise data. A lot of it's not going to move. It's too costly to train any model persistently to be relevant and accurate on that data. So you're going to have these compound AI applications, right? Whether you like it or not, right? And I think that's that slow learning that we've had over the last 3 years. Because, I mean, if you remember with generative AI, initially the approach was everyone's going to create their own foundation model.
Yes.
Every company is going to make their own foundation model, and that's going to be the first order of, quote unquote, these scaling theories.
Mm-hmm.
I refuse to call them laws, by the way. Now that it pivoted to RAG and fine tuning, and then now it's pivoted to the reason
Context.
Yeah. But this dependence on the real-time systems that we have that are more economical, I think that it seems to be starting to come into discussions more. What did you see at Databricks? In your chats, you know what I'm saying? Not just the presentation and what gets presented up there, but like some of the conversations you've had with Databricks folks, their partners, as well as customers.
Yeah, there's not that much interest in building your own model right now. I think that is going to be, after exploring that last year, companies are realizing this is something we might want to push down the road a year or two, simply because we can get more value in the here and now just by putting some guardrails around existing models. And we don't necessarily even need the biggest model to do that. Like the companies that were talking about testing out OpenAI's biggest 400 billion, 405, billion parameter model, find they can get just as good results often by using a 7 billion parameter model. Like at some point, there's only so many words you can shove into a model to provide more context from a grammatical and semantic and contextual perspective for the majority of what we do in the business world. You don't need the additional 300 or 400 billion whatevers.
And that's where they sort of landed with the MOEs when the MOEs started to come into play. Yeah. But even with the MOEs, it's like, do you need everything, or can you fine tune to a more application or domain specific model using various techniques like LoRa, et cetera?
But it ends up having those 12 experts within your model often is better than just having a big differentiated model of everything that includes, every single time that you posted a cat video or whatever.
It's a mixture of confusion at that point. So okay, cool. So hey, wrapping up here, where do you think things are going? Where do you think we're going to land next year with FinOps as well as AI?
Yeah, I think FinOps. Everybody is getting pushed to be more boring. FinOps is having to deal with data centers. Databricks' big announcements was announcing their partnership with SAP.
Is that boring?
Sorry, I mean SAP is super exciting. SAP, Cisco, Oracle. I love all you guys. But I think there's a lot of real world context happening right now where I think where the rubber hits the road is that you have to realize all these innovative technologies don't do any good if they don't talk to the 90% of your data in traditional environments that have been running your company for the past 20, 30, 40 years.
Absolutely.
Back to basics approach.
Isn't that funny? That always happens. At least it seems to happen every single time. But just really quick, your thoughts on MCP, because everyone's talking about it and going bonkers about it. And I just wanted to bring it up because, you're in a lot of conversations related to data and the AI, right? And there's all this squishy stuff in between. So I'd love your thoughts on MCP, where you think it's going, what kind of role is it going to play in your mind?
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about MCP. I find it to be a relatively easy way to augment a model with the contextual information that you need, because often the jargon and foundational papers and documents you need to ground the model actually don't take up that much data and information overall. But MCP is an easier way to add that context rather than having to retrain a model from scratch, which would be far more expensive, even with the advancements we've seen so far this year in 2025, like DeepSeek. it's still easier to use MCP. I expect that to be a very common use case as all of these, call it niche vendors, are trying to figure out how to improve, some sort of manufacturing technique or how to improve a specific type of B2B sales. It's a lot easier to use MCP and use a standard off-the-shelf model than to try to do anything else custom by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how standardization or this idea of interoperability with MCP actually works out. I mean, it reminds me of the early days of like B2B exchanges, old school. I don't know if you remember Commerce One.
Oh, yeah.
But there was this whole idea that, well, we're going to have like federations, because there's a lot of talk about, MCP servers and registries and stuff like that. I mean, we had that same conversation like 25 years ago. And at the end of the day, all that stuff ended up becoming SAP's Ariba.
Right.
So everyone went to point. There was no federation. But there are standards. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how all this stuff plays out. But hey, thank you so much for jumping on. I'm really glad to have had this chance to chat with you. This is the first time we've actually spoken to each other, right? We've been trying to put each other down at events for a few years now. And I guess I just had to pull you onto the podcast.
Sure. My pleasure.
Yeah. So why don't you take a moment to share with the audience how they can get in touch with you and tap into your research, and also just simply follow you because you're a brilliant guy.
Oh, sure. So I post prolifically on LinkedIn. Feel free to follow me there. There aren't that many Hyoun Parks out there, so you should be able to find the one who's working in tech. My company is called Amalgam Insights, and we have our website, amalgaminsights.com. And I also do a weekly podcast of my own called This Week in Enterprise Tech, where I work often with my a colleague, Charlie Araujo, who's the head of strategy over at Symphony AI. So he's a former analyst as well. So we talk about some of the big news items of the week and provide some analyst facing perspectives.
Yeah, and I'll provide a link below. And thank you so much again, Hyoun, for jumping on. And hey, everybody, thanks for hanging out and making it this far. Hope you enjoyed the conversation here. And please subscribe to our podcast, which will be featured on the Next Curve YouTube channel. Check out the audio version on Buzzsprout, or find us on your favorite podcast platform. And also subscribe to the Next Curve research portal at www.next-curve.com for the tech and industry insights that matter. And we will see you next time. Thank you so much, Hyoun.
All right. Thanks.